Welcome. My name is Marcelo Frias at the Darla School of Business, University of South Carolina. Today we're having a conversation with Nicole Wong, a Sonoco visiting fellow and executive in residence at the Folk Center for International Business at the Darla School of Business. Nicole, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you,
and we look forward to having a conversation with you about different topics that we would like to go over today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. So, Nicole, as I mentioned, you're a founder and executive at the WG consulting firm. How do you arrive at that stage? What is the pathway that you follow to arrive at that stage?
Well, I'm a consultant. My company is focused in guiding foreign companies that wish to establish themselves in Panama or to develop business in Panama or the rest of the region. How I arrived here? Well, I used to work at the government of Panama as a director of foreign policy, and I got this amazing experience to be leading negotiations with different countries from all over the world, especially with China. I led the negotiations for the establishment of diplomatic ties with the People's Republic of China. So this gave me a great experience, opened new doors for me. So I decided to use that opportunity to open my consulting firm and help through corporate diplomacy.
And since you mentioned Panama, and of course you've mentioned diplomacy, for our viewers, help us understand or take us to Panama. Where is Panama sitting today economically, geographically, especially as we look at the whole world and all the different economies in the region and the world? Where is Panama sitting today?
We want to be seen as a very influential country. We are a connector in many ways. We're not just a logistics connector, but we are also a very peaceful country. For example, we held the Summit of the Americas in 2015, and 35 world leaders went to Panama to meet, including President Obama and President Castro. That was a meeting point where they shook hands, and that was a very important moment for Panama because it was a reflection of what we want to be. We want to be a peaceful country, a country where different ideologies can meet. So that's how we want to be seen in the region, and that's our goal, the region and the world as well.
And you mentioned the word peaceful, you mentioned the word neutral, and that takes me to my next thought. So Panama is known obviously for the Panama Canal. Anything that is important typically comes also with challenges. Historically speaking, and especially more recently, could you talk about those things that are important benefits from the canal, but also some of those challenges that I assume may exist?
Well, the Panama Canal definitely is one of our main assets. We promote at all times the neutrality of the Panama Canal because we need to ensure global commerce at all costs, at all times. It comes with the cost of not being used or not being exposed to being used as a weapon or as a political weapon. We don't want the Panama Canal to be a topic in politics, in geopolitics, or in anything that can harm the neutrality that we always protect.
Excellent. So you mentioned Panama, the importance of the canal, but in your introduction you mentioned China.
Yes.
So, and you mentioned that you were part of a process, or the person leading the process to establish diplomatic relationships. Could you expand on that? What was that process about?
Well, I was the voice of the president and the vice president. I was the lead negotiator, so I had to travel to China and convey their messages and their instructions and their visions.
So that makes me think of the following. One side of the story is the process itself, and that's interesting by itself, right? But it's also interesting to see you're Nicole Wong, right? One day, your government calls you to represent your country. Relatively speaking, as you mentioned, small country relative to the Chinese economy, right? So they call you, ask you to lead this process. correct me if I'm wrong, at the time and even today, you're a young professional. If I'm not mistaken, you were practicing law before this diplomatic task. So you get the call and the ask. What's the first thing that comes through your mind? And the second one, if possible, too.
Well, the first thing is, why me, so young? But the second, no. But the second really is like, okay, now we have to study what to be careful with. Yes, it was studying, it was researching, asking questions, but in a very confidential way, thinking about Panama as a very small country, and me comparing it to this 1.4 billion people country, and how to create a win-win situation in this agreement.
I will imagine that one of the first steps in your thought process is, how am I going to present my country before China? And as in any negotiation, how do I gain their trust? How do I win them over so we can actually have a beneficial conversation for both? So if I may ask, how were you and your team and your government able to establish that trust? Any anecdote that you have that you could share with us on how that was managed and implemented?
Well, I think the former president, which is my former boss, he used to be also Secretary of State before he was a president. So he was very aware of cross-cultural negotiations and the importance of learning about cultures. So, well, this is a story. The president, when I went to the negotiation, he sent with me a handwritten letter signed by him to President Xi Jinping, saying, well, I hope that we can get to an understanding in this negotiation. I believe that this is the right path that we will take together, China and Panama, and here's a gift. And then the gift, it was a drawing made by a Chinese Panamanian painter, and the drawing was of the ship that arrived with the first Chinese migrants to my country, to Panama. So that was like a symbol on saying, well, Panama and China don't have formal political relations, but actually we have been related since more than 170 years. And I think it was very well thought by the former president. And well, that was a good way to start the negotiations with the Chinese.
Excellent. So on the same note, as we mentioned before, two different countries, two different strengths economically speaking, going into one negotiation to establish relationships. I assume that each of you had specific goals, which I will assume, correct me if I'm wrong, might have been a little different given the realities of each country. From your point of view, what were the objectives of your government in going into this path? And if you could also share, what do you believe were the objectives of the Chinese government going into this negotiation or going to this path as well? I assume those might be different, similar, or if you could share your point of view on that.
Yeah, definitely. Every country has their different interests, and we have to be well aware of that. We were very clear on our interests. We wanted to be the gateway of the Americas for China. That's what we wanted. That was the main goal.
When you mention the gateway, you mean
we
politically, culturally, economically, or what does that mean?
Economically, mainly. We see China we relate China with economic development, mainly, prosperity, development. The word is development with China. But, and then what we wanted is to attract more Chinese companies to our country, more tourists. We wanted different benefits that we didn't get before because we didn't have relations. For example, we wanted the fleet that had Panamanian flags to have special treatment in Chinese ports because we have the biggest fleet with flags, with Panamanian flags in the world. That's the biggest fleet. So those were our objectives. And then what I think the Chinese objective was, one very clear, is to gain more allies, because they wanted to make Taiwan weaker, that's their main foreign policy goal.
Okay.
And also to gain more influence in the region. And they knew that Panama was a very important country to have on their side.
Sure. So looking at those objectives, then there's always the past, the present, and the future, right? While you were going through the process, obviously you had those objectives, and you and your government believed that was the pathway forward. Remind me the dates. When was this agreement finally signed?
On the June 12th, 2017, or June 13, it was dependent.
Right.
In China, it was June 13.
Time zones, right?
Yeah, time zones.
So that makes it
Yes.
about 5 years old?
It was 5 years old, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so looking back now, from the future where we are today, what is the outcome? What does the outcome look like? Is this a positive outcome? Did it work? Are there any potential constraints or challenges you foresee in the future that could arise? They may not arise, but there's always a possibility that some challenges may arise. So A, what's the outcome? What does it look like right now? And B, what's the outlook in the future? And C, any potential challenges you see that could come up?
Okay. Well, the results are positive in general. I think the first 2 years of the relationship were the 2 years of honeymoon
Right.
between Panama and China, where we were getting to know each other. We are still getting to know each other. 5 years is nothing, actually, but the progress that it was made in the bilateral agenda in 2 years, it was impressive. We got 20 plus companies establishing their Chinese companies establishing their regional offices in Panama. We signed the Belt and Road Initiative. It was we were the first country on signing this initiative, and then 16 more follows in the region. The challenges that we're facing right now, I think it's more, we have the challenge of, we have a great influence from the United States. And since we're so influenced by the United States, sometimes we think that we have to choose between the United States and China. We cannot grow a relationship with China if we are good friends with the United States. And I don't believe it's like that, but the narrative that it's going on, I think in the rest of the region as well, makes Latin America feel like this. And I think that's one of the challenges. And well, the future challenges, I think it's on the neutrality of the canal, because there's a neutrality treaty. And the neutrality treaty says that the Panama's operation will remain neutral no matter what crisis. But China has not supported it because Taiwan is supporting in it. Yeah. That's a challenge because we need China to sign a document or a treaty. If not this treaty, a bilateral one where our neutrality is respected in paper, not only publicly. President Xi Jinping already said it, but it's not enough.
Excellent. Well, even though I've been talking to you as Nicole, the lawyer, Nicole, the former diplomat, I'm also interested to learn about you as Nicole, the person. Because at the end of the day, it is you who's driving all these processes, you who is sharing with us all this knowledge. So, Nicole, the person. Nicole, where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What were your objectives, your professional objectives back then?
I am from a very mixed family. My family, my father is Chinese, Panamanian. My mother, she is British Panamanian, and so I grew up in a very diverse family. Where we spoke English, where we had Chinese traditions as well, but we also had Panamanian traditions. And well, I went to a Chinese Panamanian school. It was actually a Taiwanese Panamanian school. And I went for 3 months to Taiwan, and I ended up loving it. And at the end, I ended up in China. Because I told my dad that I wanted to live in China after I came back from Taiwan. So I ended up in China.
Were you studying in China? Were you working?
Yes, I was in Jinan University studying Chinese. And then I came back, I went back to Panama and I studied law and graduated. I started working in a Scotiabank and in different Panamanian law firms as well. And got the opportunity to work in government because of my former boss wanting me to apply to this job at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
That's an interesting transition
Yes.
because, as you mentioned, you studied law.
Yes.
You were working in corporate law.
Yes.
How does that transition happen? You're working in law, and I understand your boss said,
Yes,
I think you should apply here.
Yes.
But I'm sure that internally in your mind you're thinking corporate law, diplomacy, private sector, government. How did that happen?
The main thing is that I didn't plan it. I just I said yes to something that I didn't know if it was going to work or not. And at the end, it worked. And I said yes because the worst case scenario would have been that I didn't like it and I would go back to practicing law.
And you have accomplished all these different aspects of your professional life. So for somebody like Nicole Wong, what's the future holding for you? Where is your sight? What, professionally speaking, where are you looking at? I
still see myself in diplomacy, in government diplomacy in the future. I don't know if it's in the near future. I think that in the path that I'm right now, in corporate diplomacy, in helping or guiding foreign companies, will help me get there, and also promoting understanding between China and the region, because I think there's a huge gap between China and Latin America, and I believe that I could help to being a bridge on that. So diplomacy, and also serving as a bridge between my region and China. I think that will be my future. Don't know how yet, but that's what I want for my future.
And you mentioned building understanding, and that takes me to my next set of questions. But this time, I like us to talk to our students.
Yes.
So, in regards to students, something that we talk to them all the time, or very often, is the need to understand cultures. What does understanding cultural differences mean? And how much should our students focus on that?
I think this is an essential matter for everyone that wants to do international business, international negotiations. Understanding the person that is in front of you, or respecting more the person, but also it will get you to achieve great success in your businesses. In any deals that you want to achieve, you are most likely to achieve them if you understand the cultural context of your counterpart. Whenever I speak with the students, I always tell them, even within the United States, there are different cultural contexts. Someone from New York negotiating with someone from South Carolina, there are different tones, different ways of communicating. So even understanding the cultural differences inside the United States is very important. Can you imagine, like with China, with Latin America, Panama? It's fascinating, and it will help each student to communicate better, to understand, and to not judge so fast.
So as we mentioned, you run your consulting firm today.
Yes.
On the main focus of the firm is to focus on international negotiation, I assume? Cross-cultural communication? What other subjects?
Well, it's mainly to help foreign companies, especially the ones that are not from America, the continent, to understand how we work in Latin America, how to communicate, how people will read or receive their message. It's mostly focused in communications, public relations, but also I assist them with stakeholder management, stakeholder mapping, and in making them understand that there are different audiences in the region that need to be served or communicated to in a completely different ways.
Sure. So for our students, again, who are about to graduate in 1 or 2 or 3 years, and they're going to start their career, right? Consulting sounds like a very interesting job. It's a big word, right? But if I'm a student who's about to graduate and I think consulting, that sounds like something I would like to do. How can I explain to them what that is? What does that look like in the daily basis or weekly basis? What's the life of a consultant? Because at the end of the day, it looks like companies are looking for you, are calling you for advice, for direction, for knowledge, right? About how to conduct their business. So for our students who are looking into consulting as a potential career, again, what does that look like?
Yes, being a consultant is actually, transferring knowledge to your clients and always knowing that not always your client is not always clear on what he or she wants, and we have to guide them. That's the role of a consultant. And I know that many of the IB students look for jobs as a consultant. I think that the jobs that they're looking at in places like McKinsey and other big consulting firms, it's very important, and it's very important to learn about structure and discipline and order in order to become an expert in something or be able to cover a lot of fields and not being an expert in something. It depends. You have to be or an expert in something or not an expert in anything, but be able to deliver in everything. Yep. So it's about delivering knowledge, research, and being very aware that you have to be on the top of your game, always delivering information on time and data-driven information, and well, I think on time, everything on time.
Excellent. So, of course, at the Moore School, we have an important array of differences in terms of what students are looking for. What would be one good advice you can provide to our students? One advice that they could remember 10 years from today?
Okay, one advice. Mentors. Formally ask them, do you want to be my mentor? And because you need feedback, you need positive, negative feedback. People who know more than you in media, in communications, in finance, in diplomacy, whatever your interests are, find mentors and let them guide you.
Right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. I'm sure they will remember not only 10 but 20 years from today. and so you have been at the Moore School as a Sonoco visiting fellow, an executive in residence to our faculty, to our students. Could you share what did you find? You arrived here a month ago, you're leaving in a couple of days. What did you find when you got here?
I learned so much from the faculties, from the students even, and it has been such a great experience for me. Giving advice to the students, talking to them closely, they are very interested in diplomacy or in in cross-cultural negotiations. It was a very good experience for me.
Nicole, we truly appreciate your time here with us during the whole month, and especially during this conversation. The Focus Center for International Business at Dartmouth School of Business is quite lucky to have you here, and we certainly hope to have you again here with us, or potentially us visiting you in Panama.
Please visit Panama. Thank you so much for receiving me here.
Excellent. Nicole, thanks so much.
Thank you.